Okay, welcome to the Chapter 2 review video. This is covering ratios and proportionality. So I'm going through, I looked at the quiz, I made the quiz, and I picked questions that were very similar to the quiz. So if you know how to do this video, you absolutely will do well on the quiz. So it's very important you're paying attention, watch it as many times as you can, it will definitely help you. So the first question is really a review question from elementary school in 6th grade, but it's necessary for the unit. So it's which ratios are equivalent to 3/5. So we're going to go and we want to check all that apply. So on the quiz, you will have a calculator. So you can use a calculator to do this, right? So you should know how to do that. But you should also know how to do this without a calculator. So I'm going to start without, and then I'll briefly talk about how we do it on a calculator. So if a ratio is equivalent to 3/5, right, if we simplify it, we're going to get the same thing. So we have 6/10. So I'm going to rewrite 6/10. And then I want to see, is that equivalent or equal to 3/5? Well, to get from 6 to 3, I can divide by 2. And then to get from 10 to 5, I can also divide by 2. So since if I do the same thing to the numerators as the denominators, then I get these same things, and we would say, yes, this is equivalent, because 3/5 is equivalent to 6/10. So I'm going to check this out. Alright, then we have -9 divided by -15. -9 divided by -15, and I want to see, is that equivalent to 3/5? Well, how do I get from -9 to 3? I'm going to need to divide by -3. And how do I get from -15 to +5? I also divide by -3. So I'm doing the same thing to the numerator as I'm doing to the denominator, and I get the same thing. So yes, these are going to be equivalent. Alright, then we have 30/40. So if I want to figure out, is that equivalent to 3/5? Well, to get from 30 to 3, I would divide by 10. But if I do 40 divided by 10, I'm not going to get 5, I'm going to get 4. So these are not equivalent. If I try to do the same thing to the numerator and the denominator, I won't get the same thing. No. Then over here, we have -3/5. -3/5 is not the same as 3/5. They're opposites of each other. So that's an automatic no. They're not the same thing. Then we have 24/40. So we can write 24/40. Is that equivalent to 3/5? Well, how do I get from 24 to 3? I would divide by 8. How do I get from 40 to 5? I would also divide by 8. So that one's going to be yes. So I'm doing the same thing to the numerator and the denominator. And then lastly, I have -24 divided by 40. So this is negative. I only have one negative sign. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. This will be -3/5. It will not be +3/5. So that's not going to be equivalent. So for this, you need to make sure you're paying attention to the sign and then trying to reduce it. So on a calculator, we can do is I can put BC, right, type in a fraction. So I'll start with the 6/10. And then I put 6 in the numerator, 10 in the denominator. So it looks like that. I'm going to press enter, and it will simplify it to 3/5. So that would be easy to tell. I could do that for a negative one as well. So BC button, -9 over -15. Right, just like that. Press enter. And again, I get 3/5. So that's going to be the same. But if I did 30 over 40, and then I press enter, that's going to be 3/4, which is not the same as 3/5. So you should use a calculator to check your work at the very least. Okay. Alright, so that's similar to the first question on the quiz. Now let's keep going. The next question. The constant of proportionality for a proportional relationship between x and y is 3. Write an equation that represents this proportional relationship. So any equation that represents a proportional relationship is in the form of y equals k, our constant of proportionality, times x. Now they're telling me my constant of proportionality, K, is equal to 3. So writing this equation is just going to be substituting in 3 for my K. Y equals 3 times X. Right, and that's all it is. There's going to be a question just like that. So if you're given a constant of proportionality, you need to be able to get to its equation. Alright, so this one's going to involve a lot of steps. So we have the graph shows the relationship between the number of pounds of bananas and the cost of the bananas. First, we're going to figure out what is the unit rate from the graph. So the unit rate is really similar to our constant of proportionality. Unit rate means how much per one thing. So for this one, we're talking about pounds. So for 1 pound of bananas, I can look up my graph, and then I'm going to go up and see what point. I have this point right here. That corresponds with a Y value of 60 cents. So we would label this point 1, 0.6, right? And that means that for 1 pound of bananas, it's going to cost 60 cents. So that's my answer. 60 cents. Well, that's really my answer. I could say like per pound. For each pound, it's going to cost 60 cents. Alright, so I took care of the unit rate. Then, something we're going to see on the quiz is we need to be able to interpret a point. So this says interpret 2, 1.2. So if I look at my graph, that's here, 2 pounds, that's my X of 2. 1.20, that's my Y, so this is the point, 2, 1.20. And it's asking us to interpret it. So what does that mean? Well, we just need to pay attention to the labels. Number of pounds is 2. And then the money is 1.20. 2 pounds of bananas cost $1.20. Right, that's what my point 2, 1.20 is saying. 2 pounds costs $1.20, and I get that by looking at the labels of my X and my Y. Alright, so we interpreted a point. That's something we need to be able to do. Then it says find the constant of proportionality from the graph. Alright, so what I'm going to do to find the constant of proportionality, always, K equals Y divided by X. So I can pick any point that's on this line. We just labeled this one, so we might as well use that. If I look at the point 2, 1.20, the 2 is my X, because that's the first digit, or the first coordinate, and the 1.20 is my Y. So to find the constant of proportionality, I just need to do 1.20 divided by 2. And 1.20 divided by 2, we're going to get 0.60. So that would be our constant of proportionality, K, 0.6. Notice that's what we had for our unit rate, because they're kind of saying the same thing. For each pound, it's going to cost 60 cents. Alright, then it asks us for an equation, so that flows naturally from what we just did. We just found that K is 0.06. Again, what's the equation for a proportional relationship? We need to learn this. Y equals K times X. And I just found that K is 0.6. So 0.60 times X. Y equals 0.60X or 0.6X, anything like that. 60 cents, 0.6, same thing. So that's our equation. And then the last question, how much will 5 pounds of bananas cost? So if we look at our graph, that's not actually on the graph, it ends at 4. But this line would keep going, and this line would keep going, right? And there's a point up there, 5 comma something. How much would 5 pounds cost? That we want to figure out. Well, now we have an equation, and we're trying to figure out what is the amount when we have 5 pounds of bananas. So that's like, what is Y, our cost, when our number of pounds, X, equals 5. So what is y when x is 5. Well, I'm going to take my equation, y equals 0.60 times x, and I'm going to replace x with 5, because now I'm saying x equals 5. And then I'll multiply that out, and we'll get y equals 3. So y is going to equal $3. So if I have 5 pounds, I get $3 is my total cost. And again, what I did there is I used my equation with my constant of proportionality, and then I multiplied that constant of proportionality times the x of 5 that I was trying to figure out. And that's going to give me my y value. Alright, so that's like all the things we could have on a graph. We could find the unit rate, interpret a point, find the constant of proportionality, write an equation, and then substitute a value into that equation in order to figure out the other thing. So when x is 5, y is 3, which in this problem means when we have 5 pounds of bananas, it's going to cost $3. Now we have, so this one's a lot easier. So the equation for a proportional relationship is y equals 7.2x. Y equals 7.2 times x. What is the constant of proportionality? So general form of an equation we said was y equals k times x. That's the general form for a proportional relationship. So what's in the place of k in this problem? 7.2. So that's all it is. 7.2 is our constant of proportionality. We just see that right from our equation. So you want to be able to go both directions. They give you a constant of proportionality, you can come up with the equation, or you look at an equation and you understand what the constant of proportionality is. Alright, now we're on back to ratios. So this is from earlier in the chapter. We have that a turtle traveled 1/10 miles in half an hour. What is the turtle's rate in miles per hour? So remember, per is telling us for 1. So let me first set this up as a ratio. 10 miles, 1/10 of a mile, over 1/2 hours. So 1/10 of a mile in half an hour. We're trying to figure out how much per hour. So that means how much in 1 hour. Alright, then we're going to need to figure out how do we get from 1/2 to 1. So we got to have two options there. We can divide by 1/2 because any number divided by itself gives you 1. So 1/2 divided by 1/2 gives me 1. Or keep, change, flip. That's the same thing as multiplying by 2 or 2 over 1. If you think about if you have half of something and then you double it, you get the whole. Right? So we can either divide by that 1/2 or multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2. And either way, it's going to, if we use a calculator, it doesn't make much of a difference. If we're doing it in our heads, it's more helpful probably to multiply. So then up here, I'm going to multiply by my 2 or divide by my 1/2. Same thing. 1/10 times 2 is 2/10, which is equivalent to 1/5 miles. Then I look at my answer choice. D is 1/5. So if the turtle goes 1/10 of a mile in half an hour, then the turtle is going 1/5 of a mile in 1 hour. Now we're going to look at a table, proportionality with a table, and go through a few things. So Coach Patrick is ordering football jerseys for his team. The table below shows the relationship between the number of jerseys ordered and the total cost of the jerseys. So football jerseys, number of jerseys, total cost. Based on the information shown, it's saying what's the total cost of 52 jerseys. So we're going to do two things before we answer that question. first, we're going to determine whether we have a proportional relationship. Then, if so, we're going to be able to write an equation, and then we can substitute 52 in for our x. So first, let's see if we have a proportional relationship. To do that, right, we need to see if we have equivalent ratios. So I can think of my number of jerseys as x, my total cost is y. And I can do 75, my y, divided by x, 75 divided by 10. I want to say equivalent ratios. Is that the same thing as 150 divided by 20, right, which I'm getting from here? And then equivalent ratios, is that the same thing as 225 divided by 30? And is that the same thing as 300 divided by 40? If all of those ratios are equivalent, which is why equivalent ratios is important. If all of these are equivalent, then yes, we have a proportional relationship. So use a calculator, don't use a calculator. 75 divided by 10, or as a fraction, right? We can either just divide it or reduce it. So that's 7.5. 150 divided by 20, we would also get 7.5. 225 divided by 30, we would also get 7.5. And 300 divided by 40, we would also get 7.5. So all of these are equal to 7.5. We have equivalent ratios. So we're going to say, yes, this is proportional. And that's fantastic. It's proportional. That means we can find the constant of proportionality, write an equation, and then answer this question. So constant of proportionality, hopefully we know it by now, is y divided by x. Oh, that's what we just did, all of these situations, but we'll do it one more time. I can pick any of these points. So we'll go with 150, 20, and 150. 20 is my x. Number of jerseys I said was x. Comes first in the table, so normally going to be our x. And then 150 I said is my y. So I'm going to do my y, 150, divided by my x, which is 20, and I'll get 7.5 as k. That's my constant of proportionality. Then I can write an equation, y equals k times x. Always, we know that, we're good, we're crushing it. If k is 7.5, then this is y equals 7.5 times x. That's my equation. Got that down. And then lastly, they're saying, what's the cost of ordering 52 jerseys? So this is going to tell us y, the total cost, based on x, the number of jerseys. So I'm going to keep my equation as is. Y equals 7.5. But now instead of x, I'm going to write 52. Because they're telling me 52 jerseys. My x, my number of jerseys, is 52. And when I do that, I'm just going to go on my calculator, or I could do it by hand. 7.5 times 52, and I get 390. So it's going to cost $390 for those 52 jerseys. So again, always, we're given a table, we're given a graph. We check to make sure it's proportional. We find the constant of proportionality. We write an equation using the constant of proportionality, and then we can substitute in values in order to find the missing thing. Now we have our last question. We're almost there. So for our last question, Helen and Michaela are paid at constant rates, constant hourly rates. So they're paid a certain amount of money per hour. Helen worked for 12 hours and got paid $111. Michaela worked for 15 hours and got paid $131.25. Who earns more money per hour? So this is comparing unit rates, which again is something we did early on in the unit, in chapter like 2-1. So first we can just talk about Helen. Helen made $111 and worked for 12 hours. If we're trying to figure out who earns more money per hour, per per is telling us 1 with the thing that follows it. So per for 1 hour. So I want to figure out hourly rate, not how much Helen earned in 12 hours, but how much Helen earns for 1 hour. So then I have to ask myself, how do I get from 12 to 1? To get from 12 to 1, I would divide by 12. Always multiplication or division. So I divide by 12. So then up here, to figure out the rate, I'm going to take 111. I'm going to divide by 12. We do that with long division, or we do it with a calculator. 111 divided by 12 is 9.25. So $9.25 per hour is how much Helen makes. I have to compare that with Michaela. So Michaela worked for 15 hours and got paid $131.25. Alright, so then again, we want to figure out how much she makes per 1 hour. So we're going to ask ourselves, how do we get from 15 to 1? We divide by 15. How do we get 131.25 to whatever we're looking for? We also need to divide by 15. We have to do the same thing in the numerator and the denominator, because we're really finding an equivalent ratio or equivalent fraction. So we do 131.25 divided by 15, and we're going to get $8.75. So Michaela gets paid $8.75. Helen gets paid $9.25. So that's all the math, but math also involves a good, strong explanation. So if I had an open-ended question like this, which you might, I'm gonna erase this, but I'm gonna remember the information I just did. And then a good description would be, so if that was an open-ended question and I just wrote Helen, you wouldn't get a lot of points for that, because you could have just guessed. But this shows me you did that math out. You found that Helen makes $9.25 an hour, that Michaela makes $8.75, and then of course that you know that $9.25 is more than $8.75. So Michaela's getting more. So you need that full sentence with the explanation with the numbers. If you understand this video, if you understand these problems, top and bottom, front and back, I am positive you will get an A on this test. Okay? This is everything you need to know. None of the problems are the exact same, but there are a lot of very similar problems. Really, the most important thing you just need to memorize is that K is equal to Y divided by X, and then the general form of an equation that's proportional is Y equals K times X. That's just about it. Those are the really key things to memorize. You will have a calculator, so you shouldn't worry too much about the numbers, but make sure you know the process. If you need help, I am available. I want to help you. Send me a message on my Instagram if you're home and you want help, or you can send me an email, but I will respond to any Instagram messages if you DM me at miss.steliotis. Okay? So get the help you need, study, do your best, last grade of the quarter.